Production.
What's poppin'? Exro squad, let's take a look at what's happening here. So we're looking like we're about to come test our support here, okay? This is a scenario we thought could potentially happen, right? So the last few videos I've posted, it looks something like this, where we have this triangle pattern developing. Now, of course, if you're looking at any triangle, there's two potential outcomes. You break to the upside or to the downside, right? So we talked about this. The potential of coming to the downside is very much so a possibility. So what do we need to look for now, right? We can't just say because it broke out of the triangle like bear, that doesn't mean it's over and we need to wash it, the trade's in the garbage. That doesn't really mean that. What we need to pay attention to is where do we come visit after this, right? So that's important to see. How do we consolidate after this big bearish break? I also do believe that this came after earnings, and there must have been some news. Again, like I'll get news updates because I'm in the Exro Discord. But here's the thing. I don't like paying attention to the news, right? One, it could bias you. It could really bias you, especially if it's a stock you're interested in and you like. It could keep you biased. We don't like that, right? I like to stay as neutral as I possibly can with markets. Another reason why I don't like paying attention to news is it doesn't like, how would I put it? Bearish news doesn't mean it's going to have a bearish reaction in the markets, right? Bullish news doesn't mean there's going to be a bullish reaction in the markets. It's very inconsistent. Like you can get any type of news and it'll do the opposite. So I like to look at the markets from an objective perspective and look at the technical analysis and use that to make my decisions. It's not for everybody. I do like looking at fundamentals like revenue, liabilities, assets, cash flow. That stuff is better to look at and have help bias you compared to news, if you see what I'm saying. Anyways, back to the technicals here. Things are still intact, right? So just because we have this low, high, higher low, higher high, our higher low here is right here, right? So let's say we break below that higher low, right? So technically there'd be a downtrend starting, right? Because if you're looking at this from another perspective, we have our high, a low, lower high was made here, right? So we can mark this right here as a lower high technically. So what we need to see now is where do we make a lower low, or are we just going to retest this zone as our support, right? So I have it marked out here at the wicks, especially if you look at the weekly time frame, it'll be a lot easier to see, but I have it at the wicks on the weekly time frame. We need to also pay attention to, it's not just about the wicks, it's about where are the weekly closes. So when we look at the line chart, it might be a little bit easier to identify. We could do this zone right here could be our support. So are we going to come back into that zone, right? Are we going to come back here and retest? This is our area. This is the higher low zone, right? That's how you have to think of it. So what's going to happen next is we need to see. We don't know what's going to happen next. Are we going to come back into this zone and hold? Is this going to be an easy A, B, C correction? We go sideways for a bit before we get a move to the upside. Potentially that could happen, right? We also need to look at the weekly EMAs here, right? So we're now below the 21 EMA on the daily time frame, right? 2-day we're below it, 3-day we're below it. The weekly time frame is the first time we've closed below it in the first little while, right? So that's something we need to pay attention to, right? Over here, will the 8 cross below the 21, that's a major sign to see, you know, this needs to consolidate a lot more, right? Again, unfortunately, sometimes things will ramp up. You want to see the characteristics of the stock to see if it's going to continue or to see if it's going to come to the downside. If we get a bearish cross here, that could indicate that there needs to be a lot more consolidation before we move onward towards $4-5, right? So if we're looking at the trend from a weekly perspective, we did have a few spurts of making higher highs and higher lows, but this zone, this major area, seems to be our struggle point right now, right here. This is our major struggle zone. So we need to see, in the meantime, if we have the strength, right, the stock will show strength if there's institutional buying, if there's other investors. Like, there can't just be Exro community buying. This needs to be a larger play here, if you see what I'm trying to get at. So let's see how this plays out in terms of making a solid support here and resistance in this zone. Potentially best case scenario, we just take a lot of time developing that next leg like this, something like that. So that's the breakdown here on Exro. Peace, guys.